All right. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how long these are going to be. Episode number 1 is dealing with the question, what is mind? All right. I think I used to have a series about depression on YouTube, which I deleted because I talked about topics that YouTube doesn't want me to talk about. And so I had to use my analytical mind. You see, now I also introduced the phrase the analytical mind. And so, what is mind? Do you mind? One thing I do to understand certain words and to distance myself from the general and commonly accepted meaning of the word is to look for the word in all kinds of places. And this is what I would say I use my mind for. So I understand mind as something that allows me to direct focus. So not to direct to direct focus. The next episode will be about consciousness, but I would like to stick with mind. Because mind can focus consciousness. Because consciousness, in a sense, can be focused. It can be narrowed down to pinpoint it into a certain direction, or it can be opened up really wide. And that has been described before as floodlight consciousness, or what's the other word? When it's floodlight is like whoosh, everything's as bright as possible. Or you say floodlight, or I don't know the word. Doesn't matter. You can look it up. But the general concept, maybe flashlight, I don't know. All right, so mind. Do you mind? What does that mean, for instance? Do you mind? It means nothing. Sometimes we have phrases that we say that literally mean nothing. It's like soliditary, an empty expression, which is something that I understood because I was thinking about it. I was trying to grasp with my mind what the word solidarity means. So, solidarity, I think that's the word, yeah. In German, Solidarität, which is something that has been used, especially in Germany at least, a lot during the pandemic. So to say, right? People who refuse to get vaccinated are unsolidary. Solidarity, that's a weird word. Are not solidary. Something like this. So I try to understand it, and what it basically is, the word has no meaning unless you take a certain standpoint. So you say this is good or this is bad. You see how that connects to duality? That's for later. So the mind can wander in all kinds of directions. When I talk to you about these topics, all kind of subtopics or over sub, and what's sub, and then I don't know, right? All kinds of topics start to unfold. So we're talking about a mind map. So the mind, if the mind is a map, what does that mean? We have all kinds of opinions and associations, which are basically ideas or opinions that are being projected onto feelings or circumstances or experiences, and that are then used to judge whatever has been experienced or felt, or whatever one is facing in a certain moment. So when we're talking about, let's say you want to climb the Mount Everest, and your association with the Mount Everest is it's huge, it's really cold, and you can never do that. That means you have quite some hurdles to pass over in order to get in your mind to a place where you even consider, only to consider even climbing Mount Everest, you have to first go through all kinds of obstacles in your mind, fears, ideas, other people's opinions, expectations, all kinds of stuff, to get to the point where you would actually do it, if you wanted to do it, right? Of course, also Mount Everest is kind of a hype. To me, not really a necessity, but certainly something that one could do if one felt like one wanted to do it. I'm not overly fond of really high, really cold places. I rather climb the heights of myself and my consciousness, but I also like to climb, like go bouldering and stuff, right? So I do see the necessity to work out, because I realized by paying attention, which would mean, by focusing my mind onto the reasons or the sources of my depression. So I was looking for ways out of my depression, and I often had the feeling I felt imprisoned. And so I used my mind to look for clues, what imprisons me, and then I used my mind to figure out how to free myself. So in order to free the mind, you have to look at all the shackles that bind the mind from an early age, often through methods of suppression or conditioning in school. For instance, you are being taught, or this kind of opinion is forced into you, that the world is a certain way, that Germans are like Nazis, or the world is round, which is an idea, just like science claims to know, or they claimed to know, that the Big Bang Theory created, Big Bang created all life, and now they say, well, apparently that wasn't so. And so you see, if the mind clings to knowing, so to assume that one knows anything at all, that's a trap. Because when you get to the bottom of a lot of things, you start to realize, I don't know shit. What I know is what I feel in any given moment, and sometimes I feel like I know, and then in the next moment I feel like, actually, I don't know. It's just something that I feel about now, but my experience has shown me that that can change. if I make a new experience, right? Maybe before that I knew that dogs are like angry monsters because I once had an experience that I associated with this and that I judged as negative. So maybe you've been bitten once and then you think that's a negative experience. And that's where your mind clings to concepts. So you can start decluttering your mind, even cleansing your mind for dirty thoughts. So a lot of people, when you talk to them and you say something, their mind immediately makes an association with something sexual. And that's when you're stuck in the root chakra, which is where all that stuff like basic instincts, that's when you generally think like this. So cleansing the mind also has something to do with cleansing yourself emotionally and stuff. But this is about the mind. So when you then think, right, if the mind is a tool that you can use to understand what makes you roll, what works for you specifically, and if you have an open mind, you can become more open to life, which means you can open up to experiences, you can open up to a harmonious relationship, for instance. You can open up to new ways of living, such as, some people, they start becoming spiritual, and then people they would have formerly considered friends start making fun of them. And so you can even use your mind to understand how you feel about certain people and whether these people still help you on your way or whether they are becoming obstacles on your way to happiness, enlightenment, and a fulfilled life. Enlightenment is just an expression for being open to all possibilities at all times and seeing life as something that happens whether you participate in it or not, because life always happens. And so some people, for instance, have problems with spirituality because in spiritual terms, sometimes people talk about God. And because their concept of God is something that has been hammered into them through Christian beliefs. The Christian belief system is a fairly rigid system. And if you say to them, for example, Christ, what Jesus was saying, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and within me. But Christians seem to think that only applies to Jesus. And then they nailed him to the cross, of course, because it's not Jesus, it's Christ, and Christ is a form of consciousness. And if you want to figure that out, right, you can use your mind to gather information and then to turn it around in your head and see what comes out of it. It's like, you can use your mind like the Rubik's Cube, right? It's like putting all the pieces into a place. I think that's all I had to say about mind. One more thing where it's fairly nicely depicted is in that series, The Queen's Gambit, where Elizabeth, which is the protagonist, practices chess in her mind by projecting a chessboard and the chess pieces onto the ceiling. And she does so with her mind. So to understand where the mind is clinging, Because if you're clinging to the idea that your childhood was terrible, you're living in the past often. So by understanding how certain situations make you feel, also about childhood, this kind of nostalgia, you can realize, okay, maybe there are some things I experienced as a child that made me feel a certain way, but maybe that feeling can change now. And so just to conclude this, the mind for me is a tool that I use to figure out what my feeling is trying to tell me. So my feeling is my intuition. And often it's really hard for me to understand that. So I use my mind to feel, to direct my feeling into all kinds of possibilities until my mind, which is also then maybe like a compass or an arrow, until I find something that hits the spot. Right? I was looking for something to do with my mind, and I started hiking, and suddenly I got an insight, and the insight said, write a book about fear. There's a beeping sound in my ear, and that's a general sign for stop or do something else. Okay, I've said it all. Mind is a tool to direct consciousness and to find out what your feeling is trying to tell you. So it's focus and the ability to solve puzzles. Yeah, you see, for me it's hard to stop talking because I just, I start, I can keep going. So my feeling tells me when to stop. But for that, my mind has to let go of me wanting to talk, yeah? All right. Because I'm so afraid I could never say enough. Take that as a token of my goodwill. Cheers.